Hi friends, I am back with another video, this time about my favorite books that I read in 2024. I read a total of 69 books in 2024, and I was hoping to get 70, but, well, I just couldn't stay up that late on New Year's Eve. So I have 2 toddlers now. I'm a foster parent, and I just can't stay up as late as I used to. So I read 69 books, just missed the mark for 70, but I still hit my reading goal of 65 books for the year, so I feel pretty good about that. I went through the books that I read this year. I read a lot of great ones, and I picked my top 10. I have a few honorable mentions as well, and I tried to stick to books that I haven't read before. I did have a few rereads this year as well. I'd love to know what your favorite books of 2024 were, and if you've read any of these and also love them, I'd like to hear about it in the comments. Alright, so let's get started with the honorable mentions. Here I'm including 2 nonfiction reads. I decided to keep my top 10 as all fiction just to make it a little easier on myself. I just find it hard to compare nonfiction and fiction because they are different. I expect different things from each one. So my first honorable mention is Where Goodness Still Grows by Amy Peterson. This is a book that my friend recommended to me a while back, and it just took me a while to finally get to it. It's about what it means to be a virtuous person today. And as someone who grew up in a Christian family and has tried to figure out what it means to be a Christian today and what I believe is right, I found this book to be incredibly encouraging and also very hopeful. I've recommended it to so many people, and it's one that I want to read over and over again. Very highly recommend this one. My next honorable mention is Beyond the Wand by Tom Felton. This book was so much fun. As a big Harry Potter fan, I loved hearing all of the behind-the-scenes stuff from Tom's perspective, hearing about all of the actors, especially the older actors and the encounters that he had with them. This book was just full of so many stories that really gave me insight into the filmmaking process and specifically about his journey being part of the Harry Potter cast. The book also continued to tell his story after Harry Potter and how that affected his life. I found it to be really interesting, and I really appreciated his honesty as well. He was very vulnerable in opening up about his struggles with addiction and other mental health issues, and the way that he came to terms with his fame and his identity as someone who grew up in the spotlight. I wouldn't say it's an amazing memoir, but if you are a big Harry Potter fan, then I think that you need to read this one. My last honorable mention is Anne of Green Gables. I only put it here because it's a reread for me. I read it either a year or 2 years ago for the first time, and this year I watched Anne with an E on Netflix, and it made me really want to reread the book. This is a story that I'm absolutely obsessed with, and when I read it this time, I annotated, and it just made me love the story even more. So I felt like I had to include it in this video. It's not in my top 10 because it's a reread, but it is probably one of my favorite books of all time now. I just need to read the rest of the series. Alright, now let's get into my top 10. I adjusted my camera a little bit because my light is coming through my window kind of weird. Hopefully this is okay. There's just this weird line, but we're just gonna roll with it. Now, I did try to rank these in order of my favorites, but the top 3 are all pretty much tied. I couldn't really decide which order to put those in. But for the most part, these are in order, so I'm going to start with number 10. And that would be My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This whole series has been recommended to me a number of times, and I finally decided to read the first book, mostly because the Amazon Prime adaptation came out. I haven't watched it yet, but after reading this book, I do want to. This is a series of retellings both from historical figures and fictional characters. And I believe that there are multiple trilogies that have come out now. There are 3 about Jane's, and then I think there are 3 about Mary's. And so this is My Lady Jane. It is about Lady Jane Grey. And this is just a really fun, entertaining, hilarious retelling of her story. It's very fictionalized, but it does pull some things from history. One of the things I specifically liked about this was the way that it portrayed the Protestants and Catholics, those who have animal magic and those who do not. Jane is picked specifically because she is a sympathizer to those who have this animal magic. She is about to unknowingly marry a prince who has this animal magic. There's political intrigue in here. There's some hate to love. And the whole thing is just incredibly entertaining. If you like history, if you like a good romance, if you like to laugh, this book is for you. I highly recommend it, and I'm sad that it took me so long to finally read it. The next book in the series is a retelling of Jane Eyre, so I really want to read Jane Eyre before I get to that one, but I definitely want to continue with this series, so it definitely needed to go in my top 10. The next book on my list, number 9, is Funny Story by Emily Henry. I read Beach Read by Emily Henry last year, and I really loved it. I haven't been as quick to jump on the Emily Henry train as everyone else, but I was really excited to try another of her novels. This one is about a children's librarian, and as a former librarian, as someone who's worked with kids a lot, I could really connect to this character. After her fiance breaks off their engagement to go be with one of his good friends, she ends up moving in with the boyfriend of that woman, and they end up getting into this fake dating situation, and quickly feelings start to grow. I love the banter. I love both of these main characters. Emily Henry is really clever, and I love the way that both characters grow in this story. This was one that was really hard to put down, and I definitely want to pick up more Emily Henry. The next one on my list is Book Lovers, which I am reading with my book club in February, and I'm sure that that one is going to be my favorite. I've heard nothing but incredible things about it. Okay, I don't have a physical copy of this next book, but number 8 is Bonesmith by Nikki Palpreto. I probably did not say that right. This is a book that one of my good friends highly recommended to me, saying that it was one of the best fantasies she had read in a long time. So I decided to pick it up and ended up making it one of my book club picks. And my entire book club was really pleasantly surprised with how unique it felt in today's young adult fantasy. You could maybe call it fantasy romance, but it's more of an adventure fantasy with a little bit of romance. There's a lot of tension, it's a slow burn, and the focus really is on the action and the adventure at hand. This story reminded me a bit of Game of Thrones, with kind of different houses or different groups of people who practice different kinds of elemental magic. And the story follows our main character who, after failing a trial, is sent to the Wall. I don't know if it was called the Wall, maybe it was called the Gate, but it's basically Jon Snow getting sent to the Wall. In this story, our main character is a bonesmith, meaning that she practices a type of magic that allows her to find ghosts and help sever them from their bones so that they can finally be at peace. We find out that there are different kinds of ghosts who have different strengths, some of which are very scary and dangerous, and some that are pretty weak and fragile. At the beginning of this book, she is competing in the final trial to become a Valkyr. Due to some treachery, she fails and she is sent off to the Wall or the Gate, I can't remember what it's called. And here she learns that there is a lot more danger outside of her protected world. After she befriends a prince and he gets kidnapped, she decides that she is going to rescue him in order to prove her worth to her father and get back into his good graces. She ends up partnering with a soldier named Julian, and there's a lot of tension and hate between the two of them. Slowly, more secrets are unveiled, and there is a much bigger plot that comes into play as you discover more of this world. I don't want to give too much away, but I found this story to be really unique and really memorable, and I really want to read the next book, which is called Ghostsmith. I absolutely love the story and highly recommend it. Number 7 on my list is Heartless Hunter by Kristen Cicerelli. I've seen this on a lot of people's favorites list, and I didn't put it super high up, but I did really love it. I found this world to be completely entrancing, and when I wasn't reading the book, I found my mind going back to the world and the characters. When you can't stop thinking about it, you know that it's a good book. I've read other books by this author that I think were better, and I think that's partially why I ranked it a little bit lower, but this story is still fantastic. This is a story about a witch who works secretly to save other witches in a world where they are oppressed. But she finds herself in a situation where she needs to put more of her identity at risk in order to complete her mission. Enter the witch hunter, or the love interest in the story. The witch decides that she is going to date this witch hunter in order to gain information from him. They both have reasons for dating the other person, and it's a really fun game of like cat and mouse. The tension is great, and it's fun to see the romance bubbling. A lot more happens in the story. It gets very exciting, but I don't want to give too much away. The next book comes out in February, and I am so excited to get my hands on it. Number 6 on my list is What the River Knows by Isabel Ibanez. And this book was everything. It was so atmospheric, and the characters were so engaging. The romance was chef's kiss. It was the perfect, like, hate to love, slow burn. The tension was fantastic. It was just everything. The cliffhanger at the end of this book left me screaming. I think I threw the book across my bed, and I just recently started reading book 2, so I just love it. This book is set in Egypt, and it follows a young girl named Inez as she tries to uncover secrets about her parents. At the beginning of the story, her parents supposedly have died, and so she goes to Egypt to learn more about what happened. From there, she ends up getting tangled into a group of archaeologists, and she discovers that she is able to find magic within certain artifacts. The magic in this story is pretty light, but it's really well done. This is described as The Mummy meets Death on the Nile, and I think that's a great comparison, especially The Mummy. I found myself envisioning Brendan Fraser a lot while reading this book, and I felt completely sucked into the atmosphere and the romance of the story. This book also completely confirmed that I do, in fact, want to take a Nile River cruise before I die. Highly, highly, highly recommend. Number 5 is another one that I don't have a physical copy of, simply because I wasn't able to find one that matched the rest of my set. That is Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J. Maas. While I was starting to read this series, the new cover started coming out in paperback, and then the old paperbacks just started disappearing. I was able to get most of them, but not the last 2 books. So trying to decide if it's worth it to try to seek those out, or if I am okay with them mismatching. I just hate a mismatching set. Anyway, Kingdom of Ash. This was a phenomenal ending to an incredible series. I struggled a bit to get through this one, I think just because I didn't want the series to end, but it was honestly everything I could have asked for. I feel like this finale really brought out some of the best in all of the characters that you have grown to love. We saw their sacrifice, we saw their heroism, we saw how much they loved each other, we saw their bravery. It was just perfect. If I were to give it a critique, I would maybe say that I wanted a few more characters to die. I mean, I didn't really, but I kind of did. Otherwise, it was a very satisfying conclusion to the series. Being that it's the last book in the series, I can't go into much detail about it. I also probably don't need to talk about it very much because the series is all over the place. But if you're looking for a fun young adult / new adult fantasy series with great world building, fantastic female characters, really good romance, some spice if that's what you're into, great plot twists, lots of plot threads that come together in the most amazing way, I highly recommend the series. Number 4 on my list is actually a series, and that is The Cursed Princess Club. This is a webtoon series by Lambcat that has recently come into print. At the end of this month, volume 4 comes out in print, so I'm really excited about that. But I've read the first 3 volumes, and I've read some of it on Webtoon as well. And honestly, I wish more people knew about this series. It is so funny, so heartwarming, so charming, full of incredible messages regarding mental health and self-image, and it's honestly impossible not to fall in love with these characters. This is about 3 princesses who are very loved by their father, who have mostly been sheltered from the world. When their father invites the plaid princes to come to their home for a party, 2 of the princesses find themselves swept off their feet, while the other gets rejected for her odd appearance. She is not conventionally attractive. This experience completely shatters her image of herself, and she decides she needs to just get away for a bit. While running away, she stumbles into the Cursed Princess Club, a group of royals who are misfits, and from there her life will never be the same. The series is full of adventure, humor, romance, and so many moments that will just completely wrap you up in a hug. I cannot recommend this enough, and I cannot wait to keep reading the series. Okay, now we're into my top 3. And like I said before, I feel like these are all kind of at the same level. I love them all so much, I couldn't really rank them. The first is actually a series. Actually, 2 of these 3 are technically series, so maybe I'm cheating a little bit. But Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. Don't ask me why it took me so long to read this. It started getting really popular when I was in college, and it even got passed around my dorm a bit. And I think I even tried to read the first few pages and just wasn't getting into it. I watched the first film when it came out, but other than that, I've mostly just kind of let it go off of my radar. That is until this year when I finally decided to read it. I'm sure that there are many things that have been spoiled for me throughout the years, but I had honestly not really paid much attention to them, and so I was able to go into this series without actually knowing too much, and man, it completely hooked me. This series was completely worth the hype, and I completely flew through these books. Peeta forever has my heart, and I just couldn't wait to find out what happened next as I was reading. I think this is now one of my favorite series of all time, and I honestly want to read it again this year. I haven't read Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, so I want to read that one this year along with the new book that's coming out about Haymitch. Ugh, I loved it. And truly, this has helped me realize how important it is for me to read backlist books, because I'm sad that I went so long without having this in my life. So yes, this is definitely in my top 3. Next, we have another series, and that is the Iskari series by Kristen Cicerelli. Yes, you've already heard her name on this list. She also wrote Heartless Hunter. Now, technically, I should probably only be including the 3rd book in this series because I had previously read the first 2 books, but I never completely finished the series. So after reading Heartless Hunter, I was like, I need to go back and reread these books because I need to know if they're as good as I remember. And yes, they are. They are phenomenal. I truly think this is some of the best young adult fantasy that I've ever read. It is so beautifully written, and the storytelling is masterful. If you read Heartless Hunter and you haven't read this series, you need to pick it up. This is a series of companion novels, each with a different female main character. I loved every single one of them, and they each had very unique journeys. They also each have romance, which were really well done. They aren't overly spicy if that's not your thing, but they still have amazing tension. These books have dragons and other mythical creatures, and probably what I love most about this series is the way that folk tales from within this world are woven into the actual novel. Throughout each novel, you'll find pages that are darker, like this. And these are folk tales that Kristen Cicerelli has created for this world. And as you read the story, you'll see how those are connected to the reality of these characters. I'm so glad that I finally took the time to not only reread the first 2 books, but actually finish the series by reading the 3rd book, because it truly cemented itself as one of the best written young adult fantasy series that I've ever read. This series really has not gotten enough hype, and I highly recommend you prioritize it. The last book in my top 3 is In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. This is book 4 in the Wayward Children series, which begins with Every Heart a Doorway. I know a lot of people had mixed feelings about Every Heart a Doorway, but I will say after continuing to read the series, I appreciate book 1 even more because it's such a good introduction to what each story will bring. This is a series of novellas about wayward children, or children who have gone to other worlds like Wonderland or Oz or Narnia, and to come back to the real world and don't know how to fit in anymore. There is a home for these children to go to, which is described in book 1, and the series follows different characters. Some stories are after book 1, some stories are before book 1, and you get to see all of these different worlds that these characters have traveled to. In an Absent Dream was one of the easiest 5 stars I've ever given. This story follows a young girl who finds a doorway into this world inspired by the Goblin Market. I think maybe they even call it the Goblin Market. But basically within this world, everything has value. Information has value. Names have value. Of course, items have value. So it's all about trade and finding what something is really worth. What's worth a lot to one person might not be worth a lot to another person. And this story brings up so many amazing questions about the worth of things and about what you're willing to sacrifice. Like the other books in this series, this one also raises questions and brings up the themes of home, about identity, about what it means to belong, and about what you're willing to give up in order to be in a place that feels like the right fit. I highly recommend this series for so many reasons. It's made me think so much about what it means to be human, what it means to belong and find home. And because these books are novellas, they're super quick to read. This is definitely my favorite so far in the series, and I feel like you could pick it up even if you haven't read the others. It's really great as a standalone story. Maybe this will be the year that I catch up on the series because there are a lot of them. And I knew that this one in particular needed to be near the top of my list. And with that being said, that is the end of my favorite books of 2024. I'd love to know if you've read any of these, if you've loved any of these, if you've hated any of these. I just want to know your thoughts. So please let me know in the comments below. And also, please let me know what your favorite books of 2024 were. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you next time.